Running around the desert in Las Vegas, looking for 2 points and some goals.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How's it going, everyone? Welcome on into another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now your number one sports podcasting network, where we're proud to bring you your team every day. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. On today's episode, I'll preview the Blackhawks matchup with the Vegas Golden Knights. Then I'll also weave through some statistics on the Blackhawks in November, as well as Connor Bedard's outstanding month. And then in segment 3, I'll compare stats for Frank Nazar from October and November and talk about why he might still be playing a little bit banged up. But first, just a quick reminder to please go and check out Locked On Blackhawks on Instagram if you haven't done so already. And have to let you all know as well that today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel. Go and download the FanDuel app now or check out FanDuel.com to get $300 worth of bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. All right, happy game day, Blackhawks fans. After playing 8 games in 18 days on home ice to close out November, I swear it felt like I was at the UC nearly every other day there for a while. The Blackhawks start a 4-game West Coast road trip here tonight for the first of 3 matchups this season with the Vegas Golden Knights. And Vegas has been a little bit underwhelming so far this year, especially considering that they landed the prize jewel of the offseason in Mitch Marner. They are still sitting in a playoff spot, but they're currently 3rd in the NHL's Pacific Division with an 11-6-8 record, giving them 30 points through their opening 25 games. And kind of similar to the Blackhawks, not a great end to November for the Golden Knights. They dropped 4 of their last 5 games, and it was actually 4 losses in a row for them before they defeated the San Jose Sharks 4-3 in their last time out on Sunday, where, by the way, 2 veteran forwards in Riley Smith and Brandon Saad were scratched by head coach Bruce Cassidy, maybe signaling a little bit of a message to his team that, hey, we got to be better here, boys. We got higher expectations than this. And the Golden Knights have lost 14 of their opening 25 games. So maybe a little bit of a message there. We'll have to wait and see if Saad and or Smith draw back into the lineup here tonight against the Hawks. But this is a matchup between 2 teams who just haven't been playing their best hockey here as of late, but did manage to claw out a victory in their last time out. And as far as the projected lineups go for the Blackhawks, going and getting right into it, I'm obviously recording this before the morning skate. Since the Hawks are out on the West Coast, their morning skate isn't going to wrap up until, or it's not even going to start until 1:30 p.m. Central Time. And of course, this is a 9 p.m. Central Time puck drop here this evening. They'll have, I believe it's another 9 o'clock game on Thursday when they play the Los Angeles Kings, who they actually will run it back with on Saturday. Fortunately, that's an 8 p.m. puck drop, and then to close out the West Coast road trip on Sunday in the back end of a back-to-back against the Anaheim Ducks, the team the Blackhawks just bested a couple of days ago. Could potentially be a little bit of a chippy matchup there with the way things unfolded in the final minutes of that contest, but that game will be starting at 7 p.m. Central Time at Honda Center in Anaheim. So only 2 9 p.m. puck drops that we got to deal with here this week. But yeah, since the Blackhawks won't be on the ice until 1:30 p.m. CT for their morning skate, felt it was only right to come out with this preview episode here of Locked On Blackhawks a little bit earlier than usual. So taking a little bit of a stab at it as far as the projected lineup here tonight. However, I do feel pretty confident that the Blackhawks are going to be running back the same lineup that we saw when they just pulled off that epic comeback win on Sunday against the Anaheim Ducks. And here's a look at the projected forward lines and defensive pairing. Starting things off, the top line, don't really see any changes coming there after Connor Bedard just had his 3rd 4-point performance of the season. Ryan Green also found the back of the net for a 2nd consecutive contest. Burakovsky and Bedard obviously have meshed really well as the top line, and I do think Ryan Green has deserved to hold on to that spot for the time being. Hopefully he'll be able to keep it up and keep getting that finished product, as when he has been playing on this top line, it feels like he gets at least one quality scoring chance every game. Just getting the finished product had been a little bit of an issue until these last couple of contests where he scored goals now in back-to-back games. So expecting that top line to remain the same. That likely means Teuvo Teravainen, Frankie Nazar, and Tyler Bertuzzi are going to remain as the second line as well. I am a little bit conflicted because I do, as I just mentioned, feel like Ryan Green deserves to hold on to that spot. However, I feel like Connor Bedard has been at his best. I mean, we've obviously seen it on the man advantage, connecting with Tyler Bertuzzi a lot in front. And I just feel like the Bertuzzi, Bedard, Burakovsky line, while it does kind of load up that top line and maybe not give, more depth elsewhere like we kind of see right now, I do feel like at some point here, Jeff Blashill is going back to that Bedard, Burakovsky top line, but it's not happening right now because Ryan Green has been faring so well. And I also do think it helps to have an energizer like Tyler Bertuzzi, who's been so good for this team this year, on the second line with Frank Nazar to maybe try to get him going a little bit, as I'll dive into here on segment 3. Not nearly the same player in November as we saw in October from number 91. So definitely understand, splitting up the three biggest offensive weapons for the Blackhawks right now in Bedard, Burakovsky, and Bertuzzi, and at least putting Bert on that second line to try and kickstart number 91, Frankie Nazar. Then on the third line, I feel like the Donato, Dickinson, Mikheyev trio is a third line that Jeff Blashill will really love, and when all three of them are healthy, I think ideally that's what he wants his checking line to look like, and I do wonder, just because Oliver Moore, I think he'd be a really great fit on that third line, but there's just not a spot for him right now. And with both Burakovsky and Bertuzzi now being fully healthy, that's also bumped Oliver Moore out of the top 6. I still feel like the Blackhawks, I still feel like Moore can benefit from a fourth line role with the Blackhawks, even if he's not playing in as many meaningful situations, but definitely is something to monitor here over these next couple of weeks in terms of whether the Blackhawks truly feel like that's the best spot for him and his development, as he's still very young in his respected career, of course. But expecting Donato, Dickinson, and Mikheyev, no reason to go and switch that up, even though maybe they weren't as sturdy as you wanted them to be in that game against the Nashville Predators over the weekend. Still feel like that's a reliable third line more times than not that Blashill can rely on. And then that leaves Colton Dach and Oliver Moore down on the fourth line, and Landon Slaggert and Sam Lafferty being the two players that I believe are going to be healthy scratched once again. Blashill was actually asked about Landon Slaggert after yesterday's optional practice, and he was asked about, weighing whether he should be up here in the NHL, even if he's not getting consistent opportunities in the lineup, as opposed to going down to Rockford and playing a major role for that team. And Blashill, I feel like it could potentially be a similar conversation with Oliver Moore in the future, especially once Captain Nick Foligno returns from that hand injury. But it doesn't seem like the Blackhawks are imminently going to make a decision on Landon Slaggert, but I do feel like at some point, I've mentioned this on the show, he's probably going to be going back down to Rockford, kind of in the same thing with Oliver Moore. Either he or Moore, most likely Slaggert, I feel like, are going to be going back to Rockford whenever Nick Foligno gets healthy. Now, obviously, we don't know if the rest of the Blackhawks forward group is going to be fully healthy at that point in time. Injuries, they just happen in this league. That's part of the game. But I do feel like when the Blackhawks have everyone right, Landon Slaggert clearly is an odd man out, and I just think because of his age, they don't necessarily want him in that spot long term. So both he and Oliver Moore's futures, I think, are going to be really interesting here over these next couple of weeks. But I don't foresee any changes to the Blackhawks forward group here tonight, especially, Colton Dach. He's played in every game this season, just scored a huge game-tying goal his last time out. So don't see him getting healthy scratched, so I expect Lafferty and Slaggert to be the two odd men out once again. Defensively, don't see any changes coming here either, obviously, since there's only 7 defensemen on the roster, and Blashill very often plays 7 defensemen. I think Vlasic and Crevier is the top pairing, Kaiser and Levshinov as the second, who, by the way, I do think have been a little shaky defensively over these last couple of weeks. And it's not just Artem Levshinov who, in the D zone, it can be a little bit of a roller coaster ride for him, but offensively, he's absolutely thriving and has been the Blackhawks' best offensive defenseman this year. But I do feel like Wyatt Kaiser's defense has dipped a little bit here over these last few weeks as well, and maybe even if that continues to be the case, it'll be something I'll dive a little bit deeper into here on Locked On Blackhawks. But they were on the ice for two of the Ducks' opening 3 goals in that first period. Levshinov was showed some really poor positioning on one of those goals. He and Kaiser also got parted like the Red Sea on another. So would love to see them kind of tighten things up and play a more stable defensive game during this 4-game road trip. And that leaves Matt Grzelcyk and Connor Murphy as the third pairing, Sam Rinzel as the 7th defenseman, who, by the way, I really do feel like has picked up his play ever since he got healthy scratched a couple of weeks ago now. I feel like he's been much more involved with his skating ability. I feel like he's maneuvering well in the offensive zone, and Blashill has given him some pretty good compliments recently as well. So like the response from Sam Rinzel, still hasn't been, perfect with the puck on his stick at all times, but I feel like he's involving himself more so offensively, and especially using that skating ability that he has. The guy can absolutely fly. We just need to see it out of him a little bit more frequently, and I feel like he's done that here as of late. And then in between the pipes, obviously at the time of this recording, not 100% sure, but I do feel pretty confident that's going to be Spencer Knight once again, just based on how I picture the Blackhawks scheduling their goaltenders during this road trip. I feel like the most logical thing to do is go with Knight here tonight, then also go with Knight on Thursday in the front end of the 2 games in a row against the Los Angeles Kings. And then over the weekend, I referenced earlier, the Blackhawks have a back-to-back. Saturday in LA, Sunday in Anaheim. And Spencer Knight is 5-0 in 5 career starts against the Ducks. He started both of the games against them so far this year. I feel like naturally you want him going once again in Anaheim to close out the road trip. That likely means Arvid Soderblom is going to be starting on Saturday in the second game against the Kings. So that leaves Spencer Knight here getting the start in Las Vegas, and then on the front end of that doubleheader against Los Angeles. So that's why I'm thinking it's going to be Spencer here tonight, coming off of a win in his last time out in that comeback over the Ducks. Now brings him to 8-5-4 on the season, 2.51 goals against average. That's risen a little bit over these last few weeks, along with a .918 save percentage, which is still good for 4th in the NHL among all goaltenders who have made 10 starts this year. According to Money Puck, he's also now 3rd in goal save above expected and 3rd in wins above replacement. So even if it hasn't been as elite as it was earlier on in the month of November, Spencer Knight still playing at a very high level and giving his team a chance every single time he's in between the pipes, thinking we're going to see number 30 once again here in Las Vegas. Last but certainly not least, my 3 keys to victory for the Hawks to make it 2 in a row and to start off this 4-game road trip and the month of December on a high note. My number 1 key to victory, I think Connor Bedard has to get the better of the Jack Eichel matchup here tonight. 2 big guns, 2 of the league's leading point producers so far this year. If Connor Bedard and the Hawks top line can win the matchup against Jack Eichel and Vegas's first line, which, by the way, last time out against San Jose, Eichel and Mitch Marner did not play on the same line. Mitch Marner was on the Knight's second line while Eichel was centering their top line. If Connor Bedard, Burakovsky, and Ryan Green can honestly at least even up the matchup with Jack Eichel, who that, line does a lot of the heavy lifting for the Knights offense as well as on the man advantage. He kind of runs their power play. So if the Blackhawks and Connor Bedard can match or best what Jack Eichel produces here tonight, I think there's a real good chance that the Hawks make it 2 wins in a row. My second key to victory for the Blackhawks is to make quick decisions and get quick pucks out of the zone defensively. I feel like the Hawks, when things have gone wrong for them, they've been coughing the puck up in the D zone, trapped in their own end for far too long, and you can kind of see the things building for the opposing team. And a lot of, the goals that the opposing team scored during the 5-game road trip came off of poor decision making or poor turnovers by the Blackhawks. So just make better decisions with the puck on your stick. Blashill is referenced. He's a guy who he prefers for his team to ice the puck as opposed to making a D-zone turnover. Because when you do commit that turnover, you're kind of caught in scramble mode. Whereas at least when you ice the puck, you have a chance to reset and be very structured defensively. And he mentioned he doesn't think his team has done a good enough job at that. And I feel like the Hawks, as a young group, sometimes can get caught trying to be a little bit too fancy and make those nice quick passes that'll get you out of the D zone. Yes, that works sometimes, but on other occasions, you just have to put your head down, chip the puck up, and live to fight another day. And I think if the Blackhawks just make better decisions altogether in the D zone with and without the puck, they're going to be set up much better defensively than they've been here recently. And then my third key to victory for Chicago, Chase Carter Hart. By the way, for anyone who hasn't seen the news, Carter Hart has officially been reinstated by the NHL as of December 1st yesterday. He will now make his first NHL start since being reinstated tonight against the Blackhawks. And he didn't really fare all that well in his three starts during a conditioning stint with Henderson down in the AHL. I believe he had a 1-2-0 record with a save percentage below 900. I know he was 1-2-0. I actually don't know if his save percentage was below 900 off the top of my head, but I do know it wasn't the prettiest conditioning stint for Carter Hart, and he hasn't seen, NHL action in quite a while. So maintain that aggressive mentality in the O-zone like they've been doing a better job at these last couple of games. Fire that biscuit on cage, crash the net, make things happen, and make Carter Hart work for it in his first NHL start in a couple of years' time. All right, that is going to take care of my preview of tonight's matchup out in Sin City with the Vegas Golden Knights. Coming up in just a minute, Hawks fans, I'll get into some stats and a recap of November for the Blackhawks. But first, I got to talk to you all about one of today's sponsors, which is FanDuel. The NBA season is here, and the Chicago Bulls, kind of like the Blackhawks, are fading a little bit after a fast start, but there's no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or just want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything, from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks, and you can also wager on Matas Buzelis, Kobe White, and other key members of the Bulls. Plus, you can also combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a much bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late fourth quarter push. And right now, FanDuel is offering new customers $300 worth of bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So go and head on over to FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel Sportsbook app to sign up now and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Per usual, just a quick reminder, if you're watching this on YouTube right now, please go and smash that like button and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks. And if you're tuning in through an audio platform, Odyssey, Spotify, whatever it may be, please go and rate and review the podcast as well if you enjoy what you're listening to here today or on a daily basis. It's all 100% free, will not cost you a penny, and really does help me out in a tremendous way in growing my platform. Segment 2 here on today's show, getting into some stats from November. Now that the month has officially come to a close, cannot believe we're already 2 months into this 25-26 season. Cannot believe we already have a foot of snow on the ground, and seemed like we got more of it last night. Not looking forward to going and shoveling my car when I step out of my apartment here in a little bit. But yes, November has, of course, officially come to a close. We're 2 months into the season, and now we can do a little bit of comparing and contrasting between the Blackhawks opening 2 months. First, in October, the Blackhawks played 11 games, and they had a 5-4-2 record. And during those 11 games, we saw, the good and the bad out of this group. We saw the opening 3-game losing streak where they were 0-2-1 to start off the campaign. And then we also saw them rally for a 5-game point streak during the middle of the month as well to kind of rebound following that shaky start. And honestly, kind of comparing it to November where the Hawks went 6-5-3 in 14 games, almost obviously more contests here in November, but kind of a similar record, right? And kind of similar to October, the Blackhawks went through a 6-game point streak in November, and they also had a 5-game losing streak. And I feel like what we've learned about this team through 2 months now, not all that different from, I think, what we were expecting going into the season. Just there have been undoubtedly more ups than I think were anticipated as the one kind of surprise in just how competitive the Blackhawks are being. But we knew this was going to be a bumpy ride throughout the course of the season for Chicago, just with their lack of experience, with being one of the youngest teams in the entire NHL. We knew they had, I talked on the show about them having the speed, the offensive upside to be much more competitive than they've been in a long time. However, it was going to be tough for this group to do it on a consistent basis because they just don't have all that much experience or exposure to the NHL grind, the NHL schedule, playing grown men on a regular basis, right? So I knew there were going to be leaps, there were going to be hurdles, there were going to be ups, there were going to be dips. But I feel like altogether, the competitive nature of the Blackhawks and again, how many ups they've had, right? Going on that 6-game point streak, the 5-game point streak in October, right? We see the real potential that this group can tap into and how they can hang with anyone in this league. That's definitely what they've showcased. However, they've also shown that they're capable of not falling flat on their face. That did happen, obviously, against the Buffalo Sabres. They had kind of a stinker against the Winnipeg Jets earlier on in the month as well. But we do know it's going to be hard for the Blackhawks, again, to just be doing hard to win games at a 5-6 game rate on a consistent basis just because they are so young. They do have a first year head coach. There's a lot of things that are kind of working against them, but altogether the upside that the Blackhawks possess and how they are more capable of, like we even just saw in their last game, pulling themselves out of the gutter and going and winning those close contested matchups. I do think that has been a pleasant surprise, and how they find themselves still right in playoff contention now that we're 25 games into the season. We've seen the highs, we've seen the lows. We kind of knew it, like I said, it was going to be a bumpy ride for the Blackhawks, but I do think altogether how long they've been able to keep this up and show their resiliency and show their fight and remain competitive has been rather impressive. But through the opening 2 months of the season, we've seen some good, we've seen some bad, but I think the Blackhawks have been much more competitive altogether, regardless of the good or bad than we initially expected. Also comparing numbers between October and November here for number 98, Connor Bedard. It was an outstanding November for Bedard, by the way. 14 games played in November, 10 goals, 13 assists, 23 points, which was good for third in the entire NHL. Led the league with 11 primary assists in the month as well. And oh yeah, also won over 54% of his faceoffs, which I should have checked this right before, but I do believe he won 8 of 12 faceoffs against the Ducks. Want to say he's above 50% now on the season, which he was just a couple of days ago. And the strides that he's made in literally every aspect of his game continues to be so remarkable. But what a month of November it was for Connor Bedard. 7 multi-point games, only 4 games without recording a point. And I mentioned on yesterday's show how he bounced back after those 4 pointless games, doing what superstars do in this league when they have a little bit of a night off. After, having his first pointless game of the month, followed that up with a hat trick against the Calgary Flames. The next time he went pointless, the next game, he had 2 assists in that ugly loss to the Buffalo Sabres. After going pointless when the Hawks were shut out against Colorado, Bedard followed that up with a goal and an assist last weekend against the Nashville Predators. And then against the Minnesota Wild, and then after going pointless against the Nashville Predators, followed that up with his third 4-point showing of the season in that comeback win against the Anaheim Ducks. So doing what superstars do, responding in a massive way, driving his teams to victory, and producing at, an unbelievable rate that's putting him right in the conversation for the Hart Trophy and the Art Ross, as he's currently third in the league in points with 37 on the season, trailing only Nathan MacKinnon and Macklin Celebrini. And a fun stat that I saw that was pointed out by Tab Bamford of Bleacher Nation Blackhawks, comparing Connor Bedard's November to Patrick Kane's November back in 2015-16 when he went on to win the Art Ross and the Hart Trophy. Bedard, as I just mentioned, 23 points, 10 goals, and 13 assists in 14 games during November, while Patrick Kane in 13 games during November of 2015 had 8 goals, 15 assists, and 23 points. Went on to finish with 106 points that year. That was best in the NHL. Also went on and claimed the Hart Trophy. Will point out that he was the only player that year that registered more than 90 points. So I don't know if 106 is going to quite cut it with the way offense has been lighting it up this year in the NHL to go and claim that Art Ross Trophy. But Connor Bedard is on an 121-point pace as a 20-year-old in his third NHL season. And while he does have, more help than he did in his first 2 years, it's still not like a high-end caliber offense that he's doing it with. I mean, otherworldly impressive stuff from Connor Bedard. In Patrick Kane's MVP season, one of his most productive months, Connor Bedard just did that as a 20-year-old. Unbelievable. And it should be really fun to see, Bedard continue that chase in the Hart Trophy conversation, in the Art Ross conversation. He's 7 points back of Nathan MacKinnon right now, but with the way that he can just go off, man, he's going to be in that race for the majority of the season. And as far as a bigger takeaway, Team Canada, I don't know how you leave this kid off of the roster. And I've been pretty adamant these last couple of months that I thought Connor Bedard was going to get shafted just because of Canada probably wanting to go with experience. Also, they just won the Four Nations face-off. I don't know how many guys they're going to be wanting to take away from that previous roster. But my, oh my, Connor Bedard is almost leaving Canada with no choice here. The way that he's been producing this season, and producing at a rate that the Blackhawks, haven't seen in a month since like Patrick Kane near almost a decade ago. So yeah, Connor Bedard finds himself in elite level conversations continuously here in his third NHL campaign. Awesome month of November for 98. We'll see what he has in store for us all here in December starting tonight. There are some quick November stats on the Blackhawks and Connor Bedard coming up in just a moment. I'll get into some November stats for Frank Nazar as well and talk about why he might still be playing a little bit banged up. But first, got to talk to you all about another one of today's sponsors, which is Drip Drop. When I'm hydrated, everything just works better. My focus, my energy, my mood, and even my skin. And that's why I've been using Drip Drop. It's doctor-developed hydration that keeps me running at full power no matter what my day looks like. It delivers 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of leading brands using a science-backed formula that's trusted by medical professionals, firefighters, and over 90% of top college and pro teams. Hydration has just become non-negotiable for me, and Drip Drop helps me feel sharper, calmer, and honestly just better overall. And right now, Drip Drop is offering podcast listeners 20% off on your first order if you go to dripdrop.com and use our promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps. Again, that's dripdrop.com with the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps to get 20% off. Go and stock up now before the heat hits hard and keep your body and mind performing at their best with Drip Drop. Segment 3, picking up where I left off and getting into some month-by-month comparisons for Frankie the Tank Nazar, number 91, who got off to a roaring start to this 25-26 season in October. In 11 games, he had 5 goals and 6 assists for 11 points. There was actually one time, I want to say it was either 9, 10, or 11 games in, where Nazar was actually the leading point scorer for the Blackhawks. And I remember thinking, because this was obviously new into the season, and I had just had my Blackhawks bold prediction episode drop not all that long prior, where I went through my season total predictions for Frank Nazar in terms of what number of points he was going to put up. And I remember thinking like, man, I'm a big Frankie Nazar stan, notorious Frank Nazar stan, as I'm sure a lot of you know. And I might have lowballed him there with that season projection. I believe I projected Frankie to have 58 points for the Blackhawks this year. And when he was at a point per game through those first 10 and 11 contests, I was like, oh my, I might have made a real big mistake here. But Nazar has not been able to produce at the same rate for the Blackhawks here in November. Ever since he suffered that injury against the Calgary Flames, he really hasn't looked the same. So I kind of wanted to go through those 2 months and compare the stats and kind of talk about what's happened with Frank Nazar and why I do wonder if he could still be playing just a little bit banged up. Because as I mentioned in October, 5 goals and 6 assists for 11 points, had 23 shots on goal for the month. And diving into his analytics here, had a 43.48 Corsi for percentage. Not very great, but I mentioned on the show, I remember in October saying that he and Tavo were a very opportunistic duo at that point in time. They weren't coming out on the right end of the analytics, but they were, scoring more goals than their opponent was when they were out there on the ice at even strength, and just making the most of those high danger opportunities. And despite that 43.48 Corsi for percentage, Nazar, like I just mentioned, was on the ice for 8 goals for to 4 goals against in his 11 games at even strength in October. And when he was on the ice, the Blackhawks generated 51 scoring chances for at even strength. Now compare this to November, where Frank Nazar played in 12 games, missed a couple due to that injury that he suffered against Calgary. He didn't score a single goal in those 12 games. While he did have 6 assists, just like he did in November, the goal scoring fell off a cliff, and he only produced 6 points total in those 12 games. And I do still feel like I mentioned, I know I said mentioned a lot there real quick, but I brought up how Nazar, despite not looking his best, was still finding a way to wind up on the stat sheet with these assists. Most of them, he wasn't like truly driving the play or making it all happen with a primary apple. A lot of them were coming off of secondary assists, but still was finding a way to wind up on the stat sheet and at least chip in somewhat offensively, which I do think was notable. And it's not like his shots on goal dropped off a cliff either. In 12 games in November, he had 25 shots on goal compared to the 23 that he had in 11 games in October. So right there at the same rate. And interestingly enough, his analytics have actually gotten better. 46.28 Corsi for percentage in November compared to the 43.48 Corsi percentage in October. The Blackhawks also generated 56 scoring chances when Nazar was on the ice at 5-on-5, pretty much the same rate that he had in October. However, getting the finished product and being the more opportunistic bunch, that did not continue, as Nazar was on the ice for only 4 goals for in 12 games at even strength in November, and was also on the ice for 9 goals against. So offensively, the production has dipped, and defensively, he's been allowing more goals than he did in that opening month. And another statistic that I thought was, very interesting. This is a little bit outdated now. This post was from November 26th from Shy Prospects on X. Make sure to go and follow that account if you don't already. But again, this could be not the most accurate statistic now, but I do still think it's indicative that Nazar isn't at his best right now. From November 26th, of Frank Nazar's 10 speed bursts at that point of the season, only 1 had occurred after the injury. His 22 mile per hour speed bursts were down. His 20 to 22 mile an hour speed bursts were down, as well as his 18 to 20 mile an hour speed bursts. And of course, this was a lower body injury that Frank Nazar suffered against the Flames. And with his pace and the way that he moves out there with those powerful strides and those quick feet as well, it feels like he could be a little hampered still because of that lower body injury, because he's just not flying at the same rate. And I think, just watching the Blackhawks from October to November, you haven't seen as many like shout out of a cannon moments out of Frank Nazar. And we know he possessed those elite level wheels. I mean, he was recording the top speed of any skater for the Blackhawks in October. And we're just not really seeing that all that regularly out of Frankie. And I feel like when he gets one-on-one situations here, he's been trying to beat guys with his stick handling and with his dangling instead of just trying to beat them outside and blow past them with that speed. So because, he didn't score a goal in November, because all of the NHL Edge speed numbers are down, I do wonder if Frankie is just still playing a little banged up at this point in time. Now, if it was a real serious injury, or even if it was something that was continuing to nag Frank, if it was something that was really serious, the Blackhawks would be holding him out of the lineup, because he's still only 21 years old, because he does have such a, he is such a key piece of what this organization has established and a part of the rebuild. If there were real concerns about Frank Nazar re-injuring himself, they'd be holding him out of the lineup. I just feel like maybe this could be like a bruise or something that's just lingering a little bit, that there's not really a worry about him suffering a re-injury. It's just him having to play through some pain and having to tough it out a little bit. I don't really know what else it could be that's, having Frank Nazar's skating stats so down, why he's not finding the back of the net. And I hate to kind of like what's the word I'm looking for here? Like infer that Frankie Nazar is injured when I don't know that 100%. But the stats kind of speak for themselves, and he just hasn't been skating at the same pace or producing at the same rate as he was earlier on in the year. And part of that obviously could just be, going through. He's not technically a rookie, but he basically is with the lack of experience that he has. He's just going through a little bit of a rough. It could just be him going through a little bit of a rough patch as well. Those ups and downs that we're going to see for the Blackhawks team, they're going to happen to young players individually as well. But I do feel like if you just watch Nazar and the way that he hasn't been flying out there, I do wonder if that is something that is going on right now, that he's just still not 100% fully healthy with the Blackhawks. Because when he was at his best earlier on in the season and created that threatening second line behind Connor Bedard, this Blackhawks offense looked mighty dangerous, and they still do, but it's definitely at a different level when Frankie Nazar is at his best, and it just feels like he hasn't been here over these last couple of weeks. Hopefully that changes, though, starting here today with the first game of December against the Vegas Golden Knights. Would love to see Frankie Nazar snap that 11-game, 12-game goal streak that he has, as he hasn't found the back of the net since October 28th. But that's going to take care of today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks, everyone. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Be sure to subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free wherever you may be listening to your podcast. That way you don't miss out on any of the latest episodes as soon as they become available. That way you can tune in on your way to work, during your lunch break, once you get home from work, whatever it may be. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can follow me on X at Jack Bushman2. My Strictly Blackhawks account can be found at Talkin' Hockey. Go and give that a follow so you don't miss any of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. Until the next episode, everyone, enjoy the rest of your days. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.